there, listeners. Are you feeling the weight of the world? Well, you're not alone. The U.S. Surgeon General says nearly 50% of parents are overwhelmed by stress. And guess what? It's affecting us all. Just last year, we heard about an epidemic of loneliness hitting half our population, especially young adults. But there's hope. I'm Scarlett Lewis, founder of the Choose Love movement. We're dedicated to your safety, health, and well-being with proactive mental health strategies. Imagine a life where stress and loneliness are replaced by joy and connection. We've already reached millions with essential life skills to prevent violence, substance abuse, and mental illness. Want to join this life-changing movement? It's easy. Visit chooselovemovement.org today. Become a member, spread the word, and access our free resources. Together, we can create a loving, supportive community. Remember, all the nurturing, healing love you give comes back to you tenfold. Thank you for choosing love.
I choose love. I choose love. Hey, hey. Hey, 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 oh.
The Choose Love movement offers no-cost solutions that keep our kids safe, providing them with the skills and tools they need to flourish. Join us in our mission to create the world we want to live in, one that's connected and compassionate. Check us out at chooselovemovement.org. Together, we can choose love.
Hey, everybody. My name is Scarlett Lewis. I'm the founder of the Choose Love movement. Today's guest is a remarkable example of what it means to choose love in the face of unimaginable pain. Azim Khamisa is a peace activist, international speaker, and the founder of the Tariq Kazim Foundation. In 1995, Azim's 20-year-old son, Tariq, was tragically shot and killed in a senseless act of violence by a 14-year-old gang member. Rather than succumb to rage or despair, Azim made the courageous choice to forgive and to transform his grief into a mission to stop youth violence. He partnered with the grandfather of his son's killer, forming an unlikely alliance built on compassion and a shared dream of peace. Today, we'll talk to Azim about his journey from heartbreak to healing, the power of forgiveness, and what it truly means to be a force for love in this world. Please welcome Azim Khamisa.
Thank you, Scarlett.
Yes, of course, and so nice to have you. It is such an honor. Thank you for being on the Choose Love podcast.
Likewise, it's great to see you, and kudos for the work you're doing. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, there's so many parallels between not only our work, but our stories and the way that we chose to thoughtfully respond to our personal heartbreak. And I'm wondering if you could maybe take us back to the moment your life changed and what that time was like for you emotionally and spiritually.
Yes, it's 30 years. Actually, it was 30 years in January. So, but you know, when you lose a child like you have, it never goes away. There isn't a day that I don't think of Tariq several times a day, I should say. And I'm sure the same is true for you.
Absolutely.
He was a good kid. He was a student at San Diego State University. He was a gifted writer and a brilliant photographer, and aspired someday to work for National Geographic. He loved travel, and he was in his sophomore year, and he worked on weekends as a pizza delivery man on Fridays and Saturdays to make some extra money for school. And this was a last delivery on a Saturday night. He was lured to a bogus address in San Diego, where I live as well. And he was at San Diego State, close to where the school is. It's a middle-class area. and he worked for a local Italian family restaurant. And it was his turn to go deliver the pizzas. And it's an area called North Park. So the gang gave the right address of the apartment building, but the wrong apartment number. So Tariq showed up, knocked on many doors, trying to find out who'd ordered the pizzas, because nobody had. And he came back to his car, put the pizzas in the trunk of his car, climbed into the driver's side seat, and as he was about to depart the scene of the crime, he was accosted by 4 youth gang members. 3 of them were 14, and the leader of the gang was 18, who handed a 9mm handgun and gave the order, "Bust him bones." Most gang members have nicknames. And he fired one round, and it came through the driver's side window. It entered my son's body under the left shoulder blade, and the bullet traveled across the upper part of his chest, and it actually exited from the right armpit. But as the coroner explained to me afterwards, he said that the bullet followed a perfect path. A perfect path. I thought that was an interesting choice of words. But he was very quick to tell me, "Mr. Khamisa, I'm not trying to be insensitive. We do not see a path like this very often. And what it means in my lingo is that you destroyed all the vital organs in your son's body." And Tariq died a couple of minutes later, drowning in his own blood at the age of 20. I know you've experienced this because it was sudden, senseless, random act of gang violence, initiation rituals, and I had no clue there were gangs. I worked in international finance. I grew up in Kenya, was educated in England, traveled the world, and routinely, flew in from London, changed suitcases, and flew to Tokyo. And I remember it literally took all of my willpower just to get out of bed. It's overwhelming grief. The total confusion as you try to figure out how and why you're gonna go forward. And I know you went through some of this trauma and devastation, because had I been there, I would have put my body between the bullet and Tariq. I mean, we were parents, we would have all done that. Of course, I wasn't there. But sometimes in deep trauma and tragedy, there is a spark of clarity. Every saint has suffered the dark night of the soul. And of course, this was the darkest night of the soul. I grew up in the Muslim faith, and I grew up as a Sufi. Sufis are the metaphysical interpretation of Islam, much like Kabbalah is the metaphysical interpretation of Judaism, and the Jesuits are the metaphysical interpretation of Christianity. So my mother was very spiritual. My dad was a businessman. So I grew up with equal emphasis on my career and my spiritual life. And thank God for that, because my degrees in mathematics and finance were pretty useless. In my deepest crisis, what really saved me was that spiritual foundation. I started to meditate at the age of 20, and I lost my son in my early 40s. And I remember when I found out that he had been killed, I was in my kitchen. I lost strength in both of my legs as I collapsed to the floor, hit my head against the refrigerator. and I had my first out-of-body experience. I believe in God, and I believe I went into the loving embrace of God. I couldn't be in my body. And I read that when victims go through deep trauma, they often do leave their body because the pain is unbearable. I don't remember how long I was gone for. And when the explosion subsided, God sent me back into my body with the wisdom that there are victims at both ends of the gun. Now, that didn't come from my intellect or my loving heart. It was a download from a higher power. And I really didn't quite get the significance of that till my best friend was with me. And I had to make those excruciating calls to his mother, who lived in Seattle at that time, my daughter, my parents. Very difficult, because the hardest things I've ever had to do. And how do you, I mean, you're a mother, how do you tell a mother that she's never going to see her son again, or give him a hug, or hear him laugh? And it took me a while, and I still remember when I finally shared with her, she let out this loud, piercing shriek. And she also hit the floor. I could actually hear her on the phone. Thank God she wasn't by herself. She was with her family, and I finished a very broken conversation with one of her brothers. But then I called my best friend, and he said, well, don't do anything, and we'll be right there. And they were with me a couple hours later, and we had visits from homicide to tell us there was a gang involved with Tariq's tragedy, and they had some eyewitnesses. And Tariq had just gotten engaged to Jennifer. They were in school together, had been dating for about 2.5 years, and they got engaged and moved into the same apartment. And she was alone, and she actually knew about the tragedy before I did, because homicide went to them first, and she was the one that I called after I got a call from homicide, because I didn't think it made sense that Tariq was killed. He was a good kid, and I thought they must have made a mistake. They do sometimes, in law, you get these cases of mistaken identity. Well, when I called her, she couldn't say anything. She was sobbing. And I was still mired in my own grief that I forgot about her. And then my best friend and his wife came. And I said, oh my God, Jennifer is by herself. Her father is a dentist in the Navy, lived in Hawaii. So my best friend's wife says, I'll go get Jennifer. You and Dan visit. So she went to get Jennifer. And the first thing out of my best friend's mouth was that whoever these kids are that took Tariq's life, I hope they fry in hell. And I said to him, I don't feel that way. I see that there are victims at both ends of the gun. I remember he broke down and cried. He said, Azim, where do you get this strength? Somebody took Adam's life, which was his son. Not only would I want the killer, I want the whole clan. So I never went there. Somehow, I felt empathy and compassion for the 14-year-old. I mean, he was 14. And I thought, how did we create a country where kids kill kids? And you've been through this.
Yes. Yes.
It happens a lot. We lose a young person like your son and mine every waking hour in the richest nation in the world. It doesn't happen in other first world countries. And the question, how did we get here? So that kind of started my journey. And then obviously I went through all the grieving parents go through, unbearable grief. Really did not know how to move forward without Tariq. I remember I was suicidal at one point. And I had a lot of support from my family and my mosque. We have a 40-day grieving period, and And one of my spiritual advisors from my faith told me that we grieve for 40 days because your son's soul um, is in close proximity of loved ones and family, which is, according to our tradition, is the time to grieve. So they would support me, bring food, and we would chant and we would pray. And I had to tell the story, and I couldn't even say Tariq died. It sounded like, and I'm sure you can relate. But he explained to me that the 40 days is the end of the grieving period. Because after 40 days, he says, your son's soul moves to a different consciousness because we believe there's journey we have to do after we die. There's work to be done on the other side. And excessive grieving by family and loved ones will impede his soul's journey in the next world. My recommendation to you is do good spiritual deeds, because good, kind spiritual deeds are spiritual currency and will transfer to your son's spirit and provide high octane fuel for his journey in the next world. Oh, I thought they should teach this stuff in college,
Beautiful.
Yeah, it really is. So 4 months later, I was, a friend of mine I live in San Diego. He has a condo in Mammoth. He says, use it. And I spent a lot of time by myself. But like 4 months after Tariq died, I went and spent a week by myself, trying to figure out how and why I wanted to go forward. And I ate out the first day, but then I mostly ate in the condo and walked every day in the beautiful spots. It was April. It was nice weather. I walked every day. I still walk 7 miles a day, and it's been part of my therapy, I guess. And this thing kept playing in my head like a broken record, that good, kind, compassionate deeds done in the name of the departed are spiritual currency and provide high octane fuel for the soul in the next world. So that's when I thought, what if I became the enemy, not of the kid who killed my son, but of the circumstances that lead many young men and women to fall through the crack and then become involved with gangs and crimes and drugs and alcohol and weapons. That's the real culprit, because it happens a lot in all parts of the United States, whether it's suburban or urban. That was a real challenge. So then I decided I would start the Khamisa Foundation, which I launched 9 months after the tragedy, with the mission initially to stop kids from killing kids by breaking the cycle of youth violence. And essentially, our mandate was to save lives of children. It's important to do. It's exactly the work you're doing. Our second was to empower them with the right choices so they don't fall through the crack and get involved with crime and drugs and gangs and alcohol and weapons. And the third was to teach the principles of nonviolence, of accountability, of empathy, of compassion, because forgiveness is a big part of our story, and peace building. And soon after, I reached out to the grandfather of my son's killer with the attitude that I'm not here screaming revenge and retribution. Rather, I see we both lost a son. Because Tony, who took Tariq's life, lived with his grandfather and calls him daddy. He was born to, his mother was 14 when she gave birth to Tony. So his grandfather was involved, unfortunately, not till he was 8 years old, and raising Tony, and had no clue that his grandson was involved with a gang. So I told his name is Ples Felix. I told him, I can't bring Tariq back, and there's nothing you can do to get Tony out of the criminal justice system. He was the first 14-year-old in the state of California to be tried as an adult. Now they moved the age back to 16, thank God. But they lowered the age from 16 to 14 on January 1st, and this tragedy happened 3 weeks later. He was the first. But the one thing you and I can do is make sure other young people in our community don't end up dead like my son, or end up in prison like your grandson. That we can do. So the real reason I reached out to you is to see, it's a big job. to meet the mandate of stopping kids from killing kids. I can't do this by myself. I need your help. And it behooves us to work together because it was your grandson that took the life of my son. So he was very quick to take my hand of forgiveness. We're still together 30 years later. I met Tony 5 years later when he was 19. It took me 5 years to go meet him. It's kind of complicated to come eyeball to eyeball.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew for me to complete my journey of forgiveness, at some point I had to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a very cathartic moment for both of us. And I could see he had shifted because the seminal moment was when we locked eyeballs and I was looking for a murderer and I didn't. I was able to climb through his eyes and
Mm-hmm.
touch his humanity. I got the spark. Your name was no different than the spark in you or whoever is listening to this podcast.
Amazing.
And he was, he was 19. He was polite. He was remorseful. He was well-mannered and didn't, portray any of a typical attitude of a 19-year-old gang member. In fact, I could see that my forgiveness had shifted. So I stayed with him for another 20 years, trying to advocating for his release. Finally, in 2019, about 5 years ago, he was in front of the parole board, and I was there advocating for his release. And even the commissioner was quite moved. He says, I've been doing this work for 25 years. I've never had the victim's father advocate for the offender's release. I said, he's got work to do, not behind bars. He's not the same person.
Mm.
He can work with a foundation and he can save a lot of lives. I know he would like to turn the clock back. I said, imagine when he shares his testimony with me on stage, and I said, we reach tens of thousands of kids every year.
Mm.
How many of those thinking about joining a gang will shift their minds?
Mm.
So he was released.
Oh,
He's
wow.
now part of the equation. He's on the board of the Tariq Khamisa Foundation, and he
Amazing.
volunteers for the foundation, as his grandfather and I have for the last 30 years, and he's very powerful on stage and very articulate. And I know that, sure, we've saved him, but he's saving all other kids. So it's a 30-year journey, but as like your story, the genesis is tragic, but sometimes the Lord works in mysterious ways because, like you, when I decided to start the foundation to create spiritual currency, what Tariq was a win for him, I found purpose in this tragedy because this is the work I do today. Of course, international finance was about money. This is about saving lives of kids, far more important, and I know you relate.
I do.
And it's a win for community and society.
Mm-hmm.
It just tells you what's possible,
Yes. Yes. Yes, because I think we both believe that the tragedies that happened to our kids didn't have to happen, that they were preventable. And that's our purpose, is to reduce and prevent the suffering that leads someone to join a gang, feel like they need that for safety and for connection, and how to not turn to drugs and violence and fall into mental illness and perpetrate violence. It's what an incredible story. So amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Really amazing. At one point you said, how did we get here? And I still wonder, like I would say when I started to speak, we live in America, and our kids are killing themselves and each other at unprecedented rates. I actually remember being in a cab in Turkey. So I had taken my older son on, I was speaking, and I remember getting in the cab. this is kind of funny. And I just mentioned to the driver, because this was, I think it was 2017 that Istanbul had a bombing that killed a lot of people. Unfortunately, we were there the day after. And so I mentioned to the cab driver, I was a little nervous to bring he was my only son then, my only son, to Turkey, with the bombing and everything. And his head whipped around and he said, "Are you kidding me? You were nervous to bring your son here?" Because he knew I was American, but he didn't know who I was. He said, "I would never bring my family to America. I would never allow them to go. You all kill each other everywhere, every place." And you know what my first reaction was? And this was maybe a few years after Jesse's murder. I was like, how dare he speak about America like that? And then I remembered, not that it's very far out of my mind, but I'm like, oh my God, he's right.
Right.
And I do, that is the exact reason why I started the Choose Love movement, is to keep kids safe. Because I say what happened to Jesse was 100% preventable, and we can keep our money safe. Why can't we keep our kids safe? And that should be a priority, although it hasn't been. And I think, who better to do that than, if other people fail, parents that have lost their children, because, what we've learned through our experience and wanting to be part of the solution is invaluable. Incredible. So you said, going back to how did we get here? How do you think we got here?
Right. Well, so when I started the foundation, Scarlett, I started with a very simple premise that violence is a learned behavior.
Mm-hmm.
No child is born violent. And if you accept that as a truism, then nonviolence can also be a learned behavior. But where do our kids learn nonviolence? I mean, it shocked me by the time our kids enter grade 1, and Jesse was about that age, they've seen over 100,000 images of violence. If it bleeds, it leads. CNN, constant negative news, movies, video games, the violence that we see on our streets. So I believe that we must make a concerted effort to teach nonviolence, because there are countries in the world. Gandhi is a good example of teaching nonviolence. The Dalai Lama is another good example. Mandela is another good example. MLK Jr., although we lost him, but he was a proponent after he met Gandhi. He started to teach nonviolence, which was a civil rights movement. But it needs to be mainstream. What you're doing and what I am doing should be as important as STEM. Because only 35% of our country are going to have an undergraduate degree. About 12% have a second degree, and about 3 or 4% have a PhD, but they all become parents.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Strength that we can rise above. I choose love.
Hey there, listeners. Are you feeling the weight of the world? Well, you're not alone. The U.S. Surgeon General says nearly 50% of parents are overwhelmed by stress. And guess what? It's affecting us all. Just last year, we heard about an epidemic of loneliness hitting half our population, especially young adults. But there's hope. I'm Scarlett Lewis, founder of the Choose Love movement. We're dedicated to your safety, health, and well-being with proactive mental health strategies. Imagine a life where stress and loneliness are replaced by joy and connection. We've already reached millions with essential life skills to prevent violence, substance abuse, and mental illness. Want to join this life-changing movement? It's easy. Visit ChooseLoveMovement.org today. Become a member, spread the word, and access our free resources. Together, we can create a loving, supportive community. Remember, all the nurturing, healing love you give comes back to you tenfold. Thank you for choosing love.
I choose love. I choose love.
So we're seeing a lot of examples of the work we've been doing. I spoke at San Diego State University the other day. This kid came up to me and said, "Mr. Khamisa, you changed my life." I said, "Well, tell me more." He said, "Well, when I was in 7th grade, you came and spoke at my school. I've just graduated from San Diego State in finance because I decided to make you my role model and not follow my older brother, my father, and my grandfather, who were all gang involved." See, his kids will not be gang involved. So it's teachable. Yeah, over 150,000 letters from kids. And I met a young lady at Bishop's. Bishop's is a school in La Jolla, which is a very exclusive part of San Diego. It's 112 years old. It's a private school. It's very expensive. And it has 800 students and 200 faculty. So the ratio is 1 to 4. So most of those kids end up in Ivy League schools. And I spoke to the faculty and the student body. And the young lady came up to me afterwards. She said the same thing to me. She says, "Mr. Khamisa, you changed my life." I said, "Well, tell me more." She said, "When I was in 7th grade, they're about 13, 14 years old. You came to my school and I was so moved with your story because I was put in the foster care system at the age of 8. Your story helped me forgive my biological mother for all the pain that she'd caused me in my life. It helped me to forgive all of my foster parents for the confusion they'd caused in my life. And as a 14-year-old, I applied myself. I want a scholarship to Bishop's. I've just graduated with a 4.4, and I have a free ride at UCLA. I'm thinking, and the determination in this woman was so palpable. It wouldn't surprise me if she changed. She's still in university. It wouldn't surprise me if she transforms the foster care system in our country.
That is incredible.
So, when you listen to stories like this, you think, why aren't we doing this work as a mainstream?
Yes.
Why aren't we giving this work as much importance as reading, writing, arithmetic? Not that you shouldn't teach all of that. Sure, you should.
Yes, of course.
But this is important to teach.
Yes.
I know it's a long-term solution, but, we are conditioned. We are very much an eye for an eye society. And as Gandhi's famous quote, "An eye for an eye, and soon the whole world is blind." We've tried that for over 2,000 years. Where has it gotten us? So my thinking is that we need to teach the principles of nonviolence. You're doing it successfully. Obviously, we're not at the tipping point. And I think the only way to get it to that tipping point is to essentially make it mainstream. That's our biggest problem. We have a waiting list for our programs. Obviously, we don't have the resources to go to every school, so we pick the ones that need us the most. And I'm hoping before I go on to the next world and join Tariq, that at least I can get the Department of Education at the state level, hopefully. It was interesting that Governor Newsom has regional offices all over the state of California, and his regional offices in San Diego. We were approached by 2 people that work there for Governor Newsom, and they had both gone through the program. I said, "Guys, help me, put this in front of Governor Newsom."
Yeah.
Because it's helped you too. Look what you're doing now. And we need to make it more mainstream. It's complicated because, it's like changing the law of Congress, which is very complex to do it, especially under the current administration, because the Department of Education is no longer at the federal level. and education doesn't seem to be an important part of the current administration's, and they're moving it to the state, which is fine because I do believe in local governance more than governance at the federal level. Of course, it's not very effective anyway. But I think that how do you get the teachings that you teach and the socio-emotional work that you're doing is what we're doing, teaching kids to become resilient.
Mhm.
There's plenty of evidence it works, that it's
Of
very
course,
teachable.
of course, in every aspect of your life.
Yeah, so it should be part of my thinking. It should be part of the mainstream. And one of the things I'm advocating on is to make this mainstream. And I think that more so for the US because the numbers are horrific, you know.
Yes. Yes, I totally agree. I don't mind that the power is being shifted back to the states, but I will say what I have experienced in the last 12 years of being an advocate for our children's safety is that it takes courageous leaders. It takes a leadership that can listen to the common sense of what we're saying that's backed up by research and actually lead the initiative and with confidence. And way too many times I have spoken to leaders that defer decisions, that work too much by committee, that are afraid of the pushback that they'll receive. It's very few and far between, I will say, that I sit with a courageous leader. And I will tell you, because like, for instance, Governor Sununu of New Hampshire, he and his director of Homeland Security came to one of my talks. And it's kind of funny listening to the director of Homeland Security say, because he had just been tasked with creating a statewide school safety initiative for the state of New Hampshire by the governor. And so he introduced me at one point after he had put Choose Love as the backbone of this support. And he said, the first time my boss, who was the governor, made me go to listen to this woman who was talking about Choose Love, I was thinking, I don't have time. And I don't want to hear about love. I need to keep our kids safe and work on this report. And he said, but when your boss is the governor, you attend. So he said, literally, I sat at the back of the room and I looked at my watch when you started and I was thinking 10 minutes into this, I'm out of here. And he said, 10 minutes into your talk, I realized this is what we need in order to get ahead of these issues. This is the hole that's missing in our statewide school safety initiative. And so they adopted Choose Love statewide. So I remember sitting with Governor Sununu in his office, and I actually had my ambassador. So I have volunteers in some states that just feel a calling and they know that this is the solution and they want to help spread the message. So Shannon initially just wanted to get Choose Love into her son's high school, but she is the one that made this inroad with the governor. So she's sitting in the governor's office with me, and Governor Sununu is saying, this makes so much sense, this proactive preventative solution. So how do I do this? What are your recommendations? And I said, well, I would hire Shannon. And he said, what, in the Department of Ed? And I said, no, because the Department of Ed is political and there are way too many competing initiatives. I said, I'd hire her out of your office and I'd make her the Choose Love director. And therefore, when she calls schools, it's like calling from the governor's office. And that's pretty cool. And so he did it. And it's like, wow, you can make decisions and choices that are in your constituents' best interests. And I think that there are far too many leaders that are afraid to do that.
Right.
and they linger.
Right. No, congratulations. I love that story. And
Yeah,
we need to duplicate that in the other 49 states.
that's right. That's
Because you're moving towards that, is that we need to make it mainstream. And our kids are hungry for it.
hungry, hungry for it.
You know, yeah.
Yes.
And it's not the kids, it's the administration and the leadership. Even in some schools that are so punitive minded, one of the things we try, and before we even start our safe school model there, we want to tell them, you're going to have to shift from a punitive mindset to a restorative mindset. Because this works only when you move from a punitive to restorative. You don't suspend and you don't expel. Because when you do that, kids are not in school. You heard about the school to prison pipeline, right? And part of the challenge is not the kids. They are receptive, they are hungry for it. It's the faculty and the administration, which goes very deep. And as you pointed out, they are afraid. They don't have the courage to
Right.
stand up for what is right.
Correct.
So I think what you're doing is brilliant, Scarlett. I think that model, and we need to take the governor from New Hampshire and have him talk to all the other governors in the 49 states, because if we can get the stuff in the mainstream, and there are good programs, you know, not only in the United States, but internationally. You know, I have a list of over 300 international organizations that are either working on conflict resolution, on forgiveness, on peace building, on restorative justice. And we can create a we can create a real effective curriculum to make sure that this is taught. And since you are already from a toddler, which is what we are not, and I've always been scratching the back of my head because our story was a little bit too violent. So we started at 4th grade. But you already figured out to reach the toddlers to that elementary, and would love to learn more about how we can collaborate. Because the
Absolutely.
earlier you start, the better it is. Then it becomes
Absolutely.
part of their DNA.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, you had mentioned, interestingly, I had heard that, and this was research back from the 70s, I believe, that by the time kids are 18, they would have seen 250,000 violent images. And that was, of course, pre-cell phones. That was TV and newspapers and print like that. And now you're saying that by the time our kids are in 1st grade, they've seen 100,000 images of violence. And those are images that you can't take back, that remain in the brain for the most part, that they can't make sense of. And interestingly also, that the age group that is the most expelled in the country is pre-K.
Right.
Pre-K is the most expelled age group in our country. And
is that right?
That is for violent and aggressive behavior. So if if you think about that for a moment, I always say, when I was putting into perspective Adam Lanza, who was the former student of Sandy Hook Elementary School, who came back to the same classrooms that he went to 1st grade in and perpetrated the crime. I was always, I always thought that he wasn't born a mass murderer. He was cultivated into what he became. As you said, it's learned. You can, as MLK Jr. said so beautifully, people have to be taught to hate. And if they can be taught to hate, they can be taught to love, for love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. So I'm looking at Adam and I'm thinking, he wasn't born a mass murderer. So what happened between the time that he was born and the time that he perpetrated this heinous crime? And of course, we know that hurt people hurt people. And so I contemplated on the pain of him, and actually learned about all the different bullying incidences and disappointments and family issues, and perhaps even sexual abuse by a trusted adult. And so it doesn't really surprise me that he wound up doing what he did, because he did not have the essential life skills, tools, and awarenesses and mindset necessary to understand that he could have grown through those things.
Right.
And so that's really, what Choose Love attempts to do, is give kids that awareness so that it takes some of the fear out of the situation. Fear is what inhibits healing and exacerbates pain. And so ultimately, you're talking about going back to that punitive mindset. That's a fear-based mindset. And both you and I are trying to implement and cultivate a love-based mindset.
Right. Right. And there's a couple more additions from what you've so eloquently shared. The one thing is that I've yet to meet an offender who was not a victim. Some of the abuse that kids go through, it's no wonder what they do. And this is very true with the prison work you do and I do. I've yet to meet an offender who was not a victim.
Agreed.
Now, the second piece about kids very young age learning, and they've seen over 100,000 images of violence because of our media and our society and our video games. Science already tells you that what you see and hear is what you think about. And what you think about then becomes a habit and controls your actions. So we've got to stop this mayhem of the kids being exposed.
Correct.
The internet is even worse.
Yes.
So that needs to be very heavily regulated.
Yes.
Because our kids grow up with the idea that it's fine to be violent. It's fine to be a condition to be an eye for an eye. It's fine to judge based on all the isms. Well, we teach, there's only one human race. Unless we get that, we'll never have peace.
Yes.
So, all of this stuff needs to be done at a young age and has to become mainstream. So, and I'm so glad that you stayed committed to this work. And it's been my life for the last 30 years and continues to be, because I see that it doesn't happen in other countries. We look at the Scandinavian countries, it's amazing, right? It's their modalities is very different. Or we could even look at Japan and some of the Asian countries. So there are programs that we can mainstream, like yours and mine and others, that we can shift the people from a young age. And I believe that it may take a couple of generations, but we can get there.
I believe that we can get there in one generation if we can cultivate the courage that it takes in our leadership to mandate this, as
Right.
you said, and to make it ubiquitous,
Right.
to make it socially acceptable, and to help the people that fear it to more understand what the premise is and how it can benefit them in their own life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we gotta keep going, and we need to increase the volume of our voice.
That's right. That's exactly right. And I feel like giving you a high five over the virtual
Right. Thank you. Yeah.
internet. Yes. Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your story. It's an incredibly painful but beautiful story. You are a glowing example of post-traumatic growth. And I really hope that people who are listening will take away your modeling and be able to glean perspective from your story with the maybe suffering and pain that they feel in their own life.
Yes.
And they're more likely to consider forgiveness, as you and I know. And I say that forgiveness is one of the most powerful things that I did. And I too felt very little, if any, anger ever towards Adam, because I knew, in fact, there were 26 victims, and I said since day one there were 28, and I included Adam and his mother, who he killed before he went to the school. And of course, that was not very popular in Newtown at the time, but I felt very strongly that they were victims as well. And everything that I do is as much to honor Adam and those children that are suffering so immensely out there, that are desperate for help, that are crying out for help, but that have been overlooked or fallen through the cracks, or we just don't understand what they're saying, or we're too mired in our in our fearful mindset and punitively to understand that what they really need is love and connection and belonging, like almost everything.
Well,
Love.
I salute you, because not easy to do that. But people don't get that forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. There's a great quote from Mandela that unforgiveness is like drinking poison and waiting for your enemy to die. If you stay in anger, hatred, and resentment, it kills you, not the other person. And the fact that it can transform the other side is a blessing as well.
Yes.
Because you look at my story now, Tony is helping other kids not follow in his former footsteps.
Yes.
And the portal for him to do was forgiveness.
Yes.
I'm kind of helping him forgive himself, because he still wakes up in the middle of the night with sweaty palms because he killed an innocent, unarmed human being. Well, that's pretty tough on your conscience.
Yes.
But by doing this work and helping others not follow in his former footsteps, he's trying to begin to heal. So forgiveness was the right choice for me and the right choice for you. We could have gone the other way. What good would that have done? So I thank the good Lord and my mom that I had the eyes to get there, as you did too.
Yes.
That you could take something so devastating and tragic and debilitating and still be able to look and come to a different perspective. It's like, I think there's a great quote from Henry David Thoreau, my favorite American philosopher. He says, not important what you see. What's important is what you look at. You and I saw the tragedy from Adam taking Jesse's life and Tony taking Starrick's life. But what we looked is that we saw victims on both ends of the gun. So not important, because you have to have that perspective that we are part of the society where children kill children. What is our accountability? Obviously, you're doing a lot, and there are other people doing a lot, but we need more people that have the courage and that care enough, because we lose too many young souls every single waking hour.
Yes.
It shouldn't be this way in the richest nation in the world.
And it doesn't have to be. And we are responsible for our children's safety, health, and well-being.
Exactly. That's why we're here.
That's why we're here. And oh, wow, this has been an incredible session. And you know what I'm thinking? I would love to host Tony on the Choose Love podcast if you think that he would come on.
Sure. Yeah, I can make that happen. Yeah.
Okay. That would be amazing. Well, so everyone, Azim has written 2 books as well. You've written 5 books. Oh my gosh. Okay. So I have the Bulletproof Spirit upstairs, and it is completely dog-eared and underlined and highlighted. And what are your other books too? So they can run out.
Well, my first was From Murder to Forgiveness, then Forgiveness to Fulfillment, and then Fulfillment to Peace. It's a trilogy. And Tony wrote the foreword to the last one.
Incredible.
And then the Bulletproof Spirit was my 4th book. And then I just finished a book 2 years ago called Leadership for the Greater Good, or people like you that I featured that are doing greater good, because the mandate is that we don't just live at home and work, though we become very materialistic in the United States. We also live in the community. So just like you've taken on a community problem and created an effective solution, as I've done with youth violence, so we need people to understand that it's not just about you getting, your career, but not doing enough for the community, because without community, where would we be? We rely so much on community, on roads, on safety, on hospitals, on education, that we need. And the book about leadership for the greater good, I am basically saying that we need leaders that have a triad of competency. Sure, they're leaders, so they need to have leadership qualities in whatever their endeavor is. But they also need to take on communities, because there's problems in every community, societal problems, and they need to create effective solutions or join people like yourself and me to help us move this further. And third, we need leaders that have a strong, and they not only espouse these values, but they are role models for strong ethical, moral, and spiritual values. So when you think about, well, how many leaders do I know that are competent in their profession, that have that are good role models, that have taken on community solutions like you have, and that they also have strong ethical, moral, and spiritual values? But there are not many. And this is true with whether it's schools or universities or politics or corporations, everywhere. So we need more leadership for the greater good. And you are a very good example of that, Scarlett.
Oh, thank you. Well, that means so much coming from you. I really appreciate that. And you are as well. Thank you so much for being on the Choose Love podcast, for everything that you do for our kids. I just feel joy at knowing, that you're out there and you're working, and all that you're doing, and all the generations that you are positively influencing. The world thanks you. And I look forward to further partnering with you and working with you to create a safer, more peaceful, and loving world for everyone.
Likewise. Thank you. And thank you for having me. And it's great to see you.
Oh, it's so good to see you.
And more importantly, thank you for your work.
Absolutely. And we will be in touch.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, hey, oh. It's all part of us. We can all choose love. It'll lift you up if you